One, two, three.
Hello, friend. The Mystical American Patriots Society is transmitting to you from our secret ice fortress and laboratory high in the Swiss Alps. This is a variety program for normal sandwich-eating Americans with some concerns about living in a deranged, post-Christian technocracy. Keep your third eye on the sky and your ear to the ground as Sumo and Smokestack direct your attention to a higher dimension. Are you ready? Stand by.
Someday you will die, but I'll be close behind and follow you into the dark. No blinding light or tunnels to gates of white, just our hands clasped so tight, waiting for the hint of a spark. If heaven and hell decide, they both are satisfied, and illuminate the nose on their vacancy signs. If there's no one beside you in your soul embarks, I'll follow you into the dark. In Catholic school, as vicious as Roman rule, I got my knuckles bruised by a lady in black. I held my tongue as she told me, son, fear is the heart of love. So I never went back. If heaven and hell decide, they both are satisfied, and illuminate the nose on their vacancy signs. If there's no one beside you when your soul embarks, I'll follow you into the dark. And you and me have seen everything to see, from Bangkok to Calgary, and the soles of your shoes are all worn down. The time for sleep is now. It's nothing to cry about, 'cause we'll hold each other soon in the blackest of rooms. If heaven and hell decide that they both are satisfied, and illuminate the nose on their vacancy signs, if there's no one beside you when your soul embarks, I'll follow you into the dark. I'll follow you into the dark. Whoa. You gotta warm up your voice in the morning is the thing. The problem is we do the show so early.
We do. Yeah, we do it really early.
I I think it's earlier for me because I'm in an earlier time zone.
Yeah, you are.
And
That's
time
true.
is relative. You know, it's the old saying. How's the old saying go? You remember the old saying?
I don't know.
It goes, time is an illusion that helps things make sense. So we're always living in the present tense. It seems unforgiving when a good thing ends. But you and I will always be back then. You and I will always be back then. And then I forget the rest of it. I think it goes, you sing, will happen, happening, happen. Good question. Will happening, happening, happen? I don't know.
What?
Nobody knows. Nobody knows. You know? Will happen, happening, happen. Like, if there was some amazing force outside of time, they could take all the moments and hang them up like pictures, I think is the next verse. It's a very complicated little exposition of a verse, which is a bit much for a cartoon show. Because that's from Adventure Time. Are you familiar with the show Adventure Time?
I've heard of it. I've heard tell of said show.
It's a good show. It's interesting in that it is extremely philosophical for being a children's show.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, as far as like muttering nonsense like time is an illusion that helps things make sense could be considered philosophical.
Right.
But that's what it does.
Okay.
There's one good show called Found a Truck. It's in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's this one boy named Finn, and he's the only human alive, and he has a friend that's a talking, shape-shifting dog. But they find a truck from the before times, and the whole show is just they meet a guy who helps them repair the truck, and the whole show is they're wandering around gathering parts for the show while the new guy that's in this one episode in high detail explains how combustion engines function. And that's the entire show. He's like, and then the spark plug goes off and they're like, chopping up a zombie while they look for a spark plug. Interesting show for an interesting time. Because that show and the song I sang came about at the same era, milieu, sort of. I mean, the Death Cab for Cutie song was a bit more, but that was like sort of the anthem of the new atheists.
Oh, yeah. No, I remember when they were hot.
The New Atheist or Death Cab for Cutie?
Both.
Yeah, that was... they even called themselves the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, there was Sam Harris. Dumb, by the way. Been shown to be very dumb, by the way, now. There was the other one that drank himself and smoked himself into cancerous death. What was his name?
I don't know.
His brother is like a journalist in Britain, in the UK. Anyway, there was him. There was Richard Dawkins.
He was in Death Cab for Cutie?
Yeah, this is also the band of this is also the composition of Death Cab for Cutie. There was Richard Dawkins, right?
What did he play?
And he tambourine.
Okay.
And he played tambourine and like vaguely disguised racist nihilism.
Okay.
My favorite thing that Richard Dawkins ever did. He was in Africa talking about the African roots of Homo sapiens,
Uh-huh.
And he was trying to convince this black man in an evangelical church in Africa that he was from a gorilla.
Yeah.
And he looked at him and he goes, I am an African ape, and so are you. Points in the black man's chest. And he's like, you're an African ape. And in hindsight, it's hilariously sort of racist to watch.
Yeah.
And the black man is just sort of sitting there going, is this happening? What is this? What is he? What is this British? Because British people have always conquered the world through undecipherable moral superiority feelings.
Yeah.
They go around, because many people do not know that Africa was colonized in the name of progressivism, and that's actually true. people, because most of the propaganda fed to the public to support going over to Africa and carving it up into bits for Europe was that we had to do this to militarily stop the slave trade of Africa.
Really?
Yeah. This had to be done because slave trade is so bad in Africa, and they'd had all these pictures of little black children, like they were drawn, obviously, in like newspapers, and they were like in chains, and then there was like a white woman with a British flag was pointing from across the sea saying, "Must be stopped." And then they would go to Africa, take over Africa, and then what they do later, and so this is the eternal cycle of Western politics, is that progressives do a horrible thing in the name of something allegedly good, right?
Okay.
And conservatives resist it. But then that thing becomes popular, and conservatives take it on as an eternal truth that the colonization of Africa is good for the Africans. And then, to gin up more support for a new thing, the progressives of the next generation call what used to happen conservative and evil, and the conservatives stick to it, and then they say, see, you did this, and we have to go do this now because of you. Which is what's happening now.
Man.
Conservatives are now like glomming onto the past 20 years progressive movement as like eternal truths.
Yeah.
You know? And then they will, in 20 years' time, gay marriage will be seen as patriarchal or something that oppresses women. And then they will rail against that. And conservatives will say, no, it was Adam and Steve. And that's how it will go.
It is true.
That's
like,
how it always
Conservatism Inc. has now fully embraced stuff like gay marriage.
Yeah, they always do. That's the way it's always been. And what they do is they provide a foil for the progressives to have a moral outrage against, to then use their new crusade. Their new crusade of global domination being like NATO and the spread of democracy, quote unquote. But it's the same thing. It's just global domination over with a veneer of moral justification that has a conservative wing which justifies it by being sort of comically stupid and drawn as a caricature of evil.
You know, it's funny, as true as this is and as provable as this pattern is, I tried to explain it to somebody recently, and they just looked at me like a deer in the headlights.
Oh yeah, I know. The whole thing operates on some level on Western people being so stupid to their own actions.
Ugh.
It's so broken. Like they don't even know they has to operate by you. You have to buy into it for it to work.
Yeah.
See, it's obviously not true. None of it works. Like it's all just a scheme of conquering territory and getting vassal states by means of military might. But it has to be disguised in something that makes you feel justified in so doing. As Viktor Orban of Hungary recently said, he said, if China comes to dominate the world in the future, that will be interesting. Because we know what Anglo domination looks like, and that is where they have to dominate you, and you must also agree that it is morally right and good.
Mm-hmm.
And the Chinese just don't care that you agree.
Yeah.
So maybe that's more refreshing.
Well,
the Chinese don't need your validation.
I mean, at least it'll be a little more straightforward.
Right. And a little less like psychologically messing with you all the time.
Well, I don't know. Like maybe the sort of the ancient China personality is that way, but communism isn't that way. So yeah. Which of those personalities will control? I don't know, but communism very much demands your ideological support of your oppression.
Here's another great example, right? Let's take the KKK. And like eugenics and racism was started as a progressive movement in all the academic circles, like eugenics and race, because it was like, well, this is how we raise the IQ of the planet and alleviate global suffering, right? It's a dirty job, but somebody's got to do it. Mm-hmm. And no one liked it at first, but then they became ascendant, and then the conservatives were like, oh, okay, we'll do that. can we join the club with the hoods? And they were like, sure, you can join the club with the hoods. And then they abandoned the club with the hoods, and they turned around a generation later and pointed at the club with the hoods and said, you guys are the problem. And then we have to do this now to destroy what you did. And that's how it's always gone on forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a cycle of, which is why if conservatives would just stop doing anything, the whole thing would stop. If there was no Republican wing at all,
yeah, the
whole edifice would collapse, which is why I constantly advocate a political position of Wu Wei, the Taoist concept of non-doing.
Just don't do anything.
Don't do anything. Don't do anything, because all of your actions are just used as a foil of justification for what the other people want to do anyway, right? And they're very expert at doing that and taking whatever you do and being like, well, yeah, and for that reason, we have to do X because, misogyny. Because of misogyny, Muammar Gaddafi must be anally raped with a bayonet. And that will cure the world.
Yeah. It sure worked out great, too. I mean, Libya.
Yeah.
Libya's really doing well now.
I want to buy the world a Coke and sit with it a while. That's America. And that's why America's so powerful. Because America has a great schizophrenia to cloak its global ambitions in moral garb, and then also forget that that's what it's doing and blind its own self to it. So that it buys into its own illusion. And then it can kill people freely without feeling guilty about it at night. And if you do feel guilty about it, we just call it PTSD and drug you. It's just a brain problem. It's not anything that was wrong.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I don't know. And then one of the ways you do that's what I mean. The new atheist movement was that also, because like a lot of the progressivism of the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s was like appealing to religious sentiment and Jesus to justify like non-racist policies, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like MLK dressed himself up as a Baptist preacher, even though he specifically denied both the resurrection and divinity of Jesus. And conservatives today, every MLK day will go, he's the greatest preacher.
I know, like, stop. MLK, like, evangelicals, conservatives, MLK was not a good dude.
Right. But see, here's the thing. But what they do is then so they appeal to that, and then now the new atheists were like, okay, we gotta gin up that juice again, right? So let's say what they were doing, let's deny all that and make that evil, and now we'll do a new kind of colonialism based on like atheistic principles, and we'll still have some of that in there, but also not. We'll go back to the racism a bit, but we'll just flip it and be like, white people are bad now. And then we'll use that to conquer the world. And then in 20 years' time, they'll flip it again. And it's just all it is forever. But it's very emotional, because that song I sang can be very like emotionally appealing, like emotionally manipulative. Which is perhaps the Anglo superpower, is emotional manipulation.
Boy, we're sure good at it.
Yeah. I mean, we are ace at that. I'm not personally.
No.
But because like I never know how to hit the right notes with emotional stuff.
Yeah.
Like the other day at work, this lady was she stubbed her toe, right? Real bad. Like bleeding. And she was like, I'm just having an awful day. And I said, trying to be sympathetic, a lot of people are these days, you got the stubbed toe, Ukraine. And it just sort of drew like a blank look from her and the others around, But I was being genuine.
I could see why that may have fallen flat.
But I was being genuine, right? But that is
right.
Like, people in Ukraine are having a bad time. her suffering doesn't diminish their suffering, right? Or vice versa. You know? So
knowing how emotions work is a feminine trait, so, cut yourself some slack.
Well, so I think I made it better though. I said, and we just have to handle this like Zelensky does. Courage, with courage.
That's smooth. It's good recovery.
Yeah, I made it better. I made it better. I think that's all that can be asked of us is to make our mistakes better, to grow and change. But today I want to ask you some questions.
Okay.
1, did a crow medicine man weaponize an enchanted prehistoric dragonfly at Custer's last stand?
I'm going to go with 2, yes.
Was the first Komodo dragon discovered in Indiana? 3, do you know the difference between a prehistoric reptile and a dinosaur?
There's no difference.
4, snake stories.
It's not a question.
Was the last living pterodactyl killed by a couple of good old boys in Tombstone?
Yeah.
Are there, in fact, bioluminescent prehistoric reptiles? And was a theropod the responsible party for the death of a young boy in Crosswicks, Ohio? Yeah. Did Chinamen on the railroad actually see flying crocodiles?
Oh, heck yes.
Right? Today, we're going to talk about the real cowboys and dinosaurs.
Oh, I'm so excited for this.
The real cowboys and dinosaurs, which brought to you by the same fella, John LeMay, who brought us a book that we covered a while ago called The Real Cowboys and Aliens. Now, because I wanted to do something, I thought I'd phone it in a bit today. A lot of our topics have been very serious lately.
Yeah.
So I thought I would lighten it up. And also, I thought last night my power barely worked because of storms and people in the house were sick. And I thought, tomorrow isn't a good day for doing something heavy. Tomorrow we need something a little lighter.
Cool, we'll just
So I'm going to cover the book Cowboys and Saurians, subtitled Dinosaurs and the Prehistoric Beasts as Seen by the Pioneers. Because there's a lot of that. It's a bit weird. But there's a whole genre of 1800s and early 1900s newspaper articles called snake stories. SNAIK, right, which is a misspelling on purpose of snake, that they would use to indicate that this is a story that was given to us, but it may be of dubious veracity. Or maybe it's true. They weren't sure. And they use the term snake in a very broad way to mean any sort of lizard. So they would have serpent stories and snake stories, and a lot of people in the Old West saw a bunch of weird reptiles, some of which sound very dinosaur-esque to the modern conception of a dinosaur, which did not at the time exist. But first, is COVID coming back? And drag queen private membership associations, are they the key to unlocking the iron grip of tyranny?
What?
Are they?
Are those two things related?
Yeah, may not really, but I wanted to talk about it. Because I love COVID. At this point, COVID has been with us almost the entire life of our show.
Yeah, true.
What would we do without it?
Yeah.
Without people freaking out that they have a cold, running to the hospital, and then the doctors being afraid to touch them out of fear of mortality, and then shoving tubes down their throat and killing them, where would we be?
Good point. Yeah.
Where would we as a nation be? What would Tucker Carlson have to talk about on his show?
Yeah.
What would you be able to virtue signal about? You can only put up so many black fists.
We should really be thankful for COVID.
Everything with gratitude.
Yeah.
Always with gratitude. COVID has been the source of constant content for this show. So thank you to Dr. Fauci as a content creator. He's one of the greatest content creators of all time.
Yeah, he's just creating
the amount of content,
biological content,
biological and otherwise, of media content, of actual physical germs which kill, of Eldritchian horror stories of cutting the heads off beagles or whatever. He just makes the content. I mean, like, who else has given the world more to talk about than Dr. Fauci? And he recently said in an article on Fox News, Americans should be prepared for new COVID restrictions. And I was like, thank goodness.
Oh, yeah, and but this time they're going to be rigid.
This time they're going to be like,
this time we're really going to get tough.
But yeah, so Americans should be prepared for new COVID restrictions, because Omicron is now BA2 Omicron.
Oh man, we're dead
or something. I don't know what. This is all nonsense. Obviously, there's no way to tell what thing is going around the majority of people. They're just guessing. And I even doubt that the virus is the cause of anything, because viruses are inanimate objects like pieces of dust on the ground. They don't do anything. They can't move. They don't reproduce. They don't have any metabolism. But anyway, this was the new headline, the big headline on the Fox News. Dr. Fauci said, listen, we U.S. residents, quote, need to be prepared for the possibility of restrictions being put back into place. And I love this because I said to people, Ukraine, just like Black Lives Matter, when you have a thing that upsets everyone, you have to occasionally change it out for something different that upsets everyone. And so, like, you'll have a pandemic, and then they'll be like, oh, but now there is no really a pandemic for this 2 months while we George Floyd.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they needed a winter break. That was the summer break. And then they needed a winter break. And they were like, Ukraine.
Yeah, that was a good break.
Ukraine is the break. Mm-hmm. And I told people, you're going to be so upset when they just go back to COVID as if nothing happened. But they will. And it's going to be fantastic. They're just going to say, oh, man, we got to do all that stuff again. They're like, what? I thought everyone was okay. Yeah, I know you did, but they're not. Like, the hospital is overwhelmed. And they'll point to a building that you can't see the inside of, and it'll be like, oh no, the hospital is overwhelmed. And at some point, someone will go, should if this keeps happening, should we build more ICU things? And they'll say, no, that would be racism. And then, or whatever the reason is, right? But they're just gonna go. And so Fauci said, I don't want to use the word lockdown. That has a charged element to it.
Yeah, you bet it does.
But I believe we must keep our eye on the pattern of what we're seeing with infections. Having said that, he says, we should need to be prepared for the possibility that we would have another variant that would come along. And then, if things change and we do get a variant that does give us that uptick in hospitalizations, we should be prepared and flexible enough to pivot towards going back, at least temporarily, to a more rigid type of restrictions, such as requiring masks indoors. And this is all premised on Americans' superpower of having the memory of a goldfish and never analyzing their own moral positions, because this just allows you to enforce a certain sort of biological slavery over all of your vassal states, which is helpful. Just make Japan do it and all of NATO. Yep. Africa's not in NATO, so they didn't get sick and die, strangely. And Wall Street Journal recently was like, examining the curiosity of Africa's very low mortality rate to COVID.
Yeah, funny that.
I was like, oh, well, they're not in the thing, so they can't be forced to be insane.
Yeah.
But I approve of it because Americans deserve it, and they deserve it. They deserve it. This is what they want, and this is what they're going to get, And it will also give us more to talk about on the show, so that's good.
Yep.
That's good, right? And this idea of this constantly changing variants is so stupid, right? Why doesn't that happen with everything else? Why are vaccines ever effective?
Good question.
Why did this not happen with the smallpox or the whatever it is? Why is it, if this is how these things work? And like, well, this one, it mutates more. How? It just do. But why? Because it does. What's the difference? Well, this one's a that and that one's a this. And like, oh, okay. Did you know that during the Spanish flu epidemic, for the first 10 years, it wasn't until 10 years after it happened that they declared it was a flu.
Yeah, they thought it was a bacteria for the whole thing.
And they were probably correct. And even Fauci himself, before this happened, released a paper saying, you know what? The Spanish flu was probably a combination of flu and bacteria, which doesn't make any sense at all. How would they propagate together?
They don't travel together.
It doesn't make any sense. None of that is sensical. But he was like, it was just like them being like, there is actually more evidence for because it doesn't. So anyway, because like wartime conditions and people having less food and being in poorer sanitation leads to the proliferation of certain kinds of bacteria. When sanitation goes down, bacteria go up.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And that makes sense. It doesn't make sense that a flu virus appears everywhere in the world at basically the same time, in a time when international travel is not really a big thing.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. That's never made any sense. And yet they just roll with it. And that's why at the time they were like, this isn't a flu. It can't be a flu. It doesn't have any of the symptoms of the flu. And then 10 years later, like, you know what? That was a flu. And if we had a vaccine, it would have been better. But
selling them.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, but I love it. I love it. This is the insanity that this show thrives on. And it creates Americans which are colorful and which are unstable. And it breeds mental illness and all the things that make life worth living. Because if people, imagine how boring it would be if everyone in America was sensible and like, imagine how boring it would be if everyone was like a upright saint. It would be
I don't know.
So
we probably
boring.
Wouldn't be able to handle it, but
I know everyone. It would be a plague of like good people. Just this plague of good people running around, never doing anything interesting and funny. And so you have to. That's why you have to be like, okay, well, maybe this is all for a purpose. Maybe this is God just being like, I would really like some laughs. And then he sees, like, what I want them to do, this is because people would do it. And if Dr. Fauci, if you're listening, please say this. You need to say that there's been a study that the virus hangs in the air indoor settings at approximately and you can give it due to like most people's air conditioning temperature settings and air pressure or whatever. The virus hangs at about 5 feet in the air, usually. And if you crawl on the ground, then you'll be safer, right?
They would do it.
They would do it. That's what I know. And so people, imagine going to the grocery store and everyone's like crawling around, opening the little fridge doors and like reaching up, holding their breath for a sack of peas. It would be fantastic.
Oh, man.
And I just make it more ridiculous.
Could you imagine like going to the grocery store and there are like half the people there are crawling on the floor and looking up at you like you're insane for walking around on your feet?
I would love that.
Oh man.
I would make a little sign that says I am disabled and cannot bend over. Please do not shun me.
I think it would have to become sort of a pastime of just kicking over the people that are crawling on the floor.
Yeah, And
just
maybe
like
that's,
kick them over like a turtle on their back, and they're just like waving their legs.
Yeah, with their 7 masks on and they can't see. Yeah, and they're covered in rubber gloves. Yeah. I mean, what would be better content?
Oh, man.
Fauci is the greatest content creator that's ever existed. You know? And can you play that thing I sent you? This is the sort of person that it produces.
All right.
Which gives us good content.
I'm gonna try to enhance this clip in post, but we'll see. It's pretty good. So set it up. What are we listening to here?
There's a lady on a plane who's from Portland, I think.
Yes.
And I don't know if we need to listen to the whole clip before we get that, but she sits next to someone with like a Trump shirt and just has a meltdown.
All right.
And it's like, I need you to be removed from this plane.
Yeah, she gets kicked
off. And then instead of that, she gets removed from the plane.
Yeah, just listen to this lady and how insane she is.
She has called me names and insulted me just for sitting down in the seat, saying that I came here to celebrate today.
Is there going to be a problem? I would like for him to change seats with someone. No, I'm going to get somebody. Well, you don't have that right. So I will get somebody to come and talk. You pretend you have the moral high ground, but you put that man's finger on the nuclear button. That man doesn't believe in climate change. Do you believe in gravity? Did you know gravity is just a theory?
You grab your belongings when you come.
Right. Where?
But that's it. We're gonna have to take you off this plane right now. Can you grab your belongings and come with me, please? Can you grab your belongings and come with me?
No. I paid for this seat and I'm sitting here. He is in my space.
She's called the hostilities.
These are one or two ways right now. I need you to grab your belongings and come with me. Right there. That's where the plane is. Transportation police.
I'm going home now. My mother-in-law, his mother, died. You had to be here. I'm going home. There is no way I'm getting off this plane.
Let me just pause here and say that in this scene, this horrible hag's husband is like this little pencil neck looking nerd, and he's just sitting there motionless, not saying anything while his wife is totally spazzing out.
Which is the only way you can handle such situations.
And
there's nothing he could do that would make it better.
He's like making grasping motions at his chest slowly. And it's like there's an imaginary string of pearls there that he's just trying to clutch. Well,
I think he's trying to calm his heart, like she's doing it again.
Oh,
she's doing it
like
again.
it's so.
Props to this man. He obviously loves this woman and has put up with her insanity for years.
Oh,
and he loves her in spite of that insanity, and so that love must be appreciated. You know that.
I guess
we should all hope for someone that can love us in our times of absolute derangement.
I don't think this lady deserves it. Do you want me to keep going? She fights with the attendants.
She gets in a fight with them, and it's it's the same.
Eventually, she gets escorted off the plane, and everyone claps at the end. It's great. I'll link it in the show notes.
And then she has to sit there and say, she gets off the plane, and everyone's clapping for her, and she says, "Wait a minute, am I the baddie?" You're supposed to clap for me because I was George Floyd. Yeah. Why are they clapping for the other guy? You know? And that cycle, that cycle of death and rebirth that we all must go through, this woman had to put herself through, is how you learn, because I guess have compassion for these people. Because think about what she was saying. You put that man's finger on the nuclear button. There are no nuclear bombs. She's been driven insane by lies and propaganda. No one ever pushes the button because there is no button. That doesn't.
Well, imagine just like living your life in fear that somebody who you think is Orange Man bad might nuke everybody, might blow up the world with nukes. Like imagine if you're going to scold a perfect stranger over that on an airplane to the point where you get kicked off the plane, that you're that wound up about this idea that Trump had his finger on the nuclear button. I mean, holy cow. Supposedly Biden, who's mentally incapacitated, has his finger on the nuclear button. I don't lose sleep at night over that.
I don't either, because I know there's no nuclear button.
It's like how wrapped up in this nonsense do you have to be?
You have to be. Yeah, that's why I say have compassion for them, because they are in a level of hell that people have difficulty imagining. Like it's these illusions that have blinded them. First of all, like, just not to harp on the nuclear bomb thing again, but even if there are nuclear bombs, there's no red button at the president's desk which he can push and shoot them all.
Right.
That doesn't. So the red button thing is a myth, regardless. And then on top of that, their thermonuclear bombs do not make sense. Right? So that is another problem. So, and then she's like, he doesn't believe in climate change. It's another thing. In her mind, so this is this woman's mind, right? America elected a racist fascist who is also orange to the presidency. And at his desk, there is a red button that he can push to blow up the whole world if he so chooses. This is a problem because the polar bears are also dying. And he doesn't believe that. The orange fascist that we elected doesn't believe that the sea levels are going to swallow Florida within 20 years' time. So he might push the button thinking it gives him some degree of power, when really that would destroy whatever infrastructure we have as a planet to survive the coming apocalypse caused by cow farts, you see. And he doesn't believe in the gravity. It's just a theory too. And so everyone around her is unvaccinated. They're cheering for Russia to destroy democracy in Ukraine. And they don't believe in the sacrifice of George Floyd and or the victimization of persons of color with AIDS. So, in her head, this is all happening when she sees a t-shirt. Do you see? And that's why you have to have compassion on this kind of person, because they are gone. And you should just reach out and hug them and be like, it's okay.
I mean, she is gone. She
say,
is.
I love you, and then maybe you whisper, and Trump loves you too, or something. I don't know. Just whisper to her, it's okay. You don't have to fight this battle today. Climate change is not going to be solved on this airplane. It's okay. It's okay. And you just comfort them, and because the illusions, they've bought into all of the lies, hook, line, and sinker, and they don't see any way out. And the conservatives also do that too, not just because they're like, they're gonna get me, and they're gonna boo, and the tang, and the ba, and they make me get the jet. All these things. And they get insane also, right? Like, and you can see this because like putting pronouns in your bio or whatever in Twitter is dumb. But also, like, why do you care? People get upset about it because it triggers a cascade of if-then statements in their head about the bad things that will happen if people believe this thing.
Well, I think there's this idea on both sides that they think that making the whole world and all the people in it the way I think they should be is attainable.
And the only way to save humanity.
Yeah.
Not only but it's the only way that things can happen that are good. If they don't do that, otherwise everything's going to... And they come up with a scenario in their head of if people don't think this, then X. And if X happens, then Y. And if Y happens, then Z. And if Z happens, then there are no white people left. It's all just a giant globe of black people pushing nuclear buttons at each other. Or something. Right? I was trying to combine like the right-wing extreme with the left-wing extreme.
Sure.
Something like that. It's all just black people doing gangster rap with nuclear weapons. Right? Very soon. That's the future. It's little Big Smalls, and he's got Fat Man.
Yeah.
And there's Biggie Slim J, little boy.
Yeah.
And that may be itself a euphemism to pedophilia.
And they've all got nukes.
Know. Yeah. Did you ever think about why they called it Fat Man and Little Boy? Because it's obviously a pedo reference because it's not real and they're just...
No, I'd never thought about that, but that's...
Right. I mean, why call it that? It's so. They always tell you.
I don't know.
They always tell you, right?
I can't
Just
handle
like
this.
when I remember, I was arguing flat Earth with somebody, and I wasn't the first person to do this, because Owen Benjamin had actually pointed out the same thing on this same picture, but. And I'm not a flat earther. I don't know what it is, right? I'm just saying there's things that don't make sense, and sometimes they fake the space.
Sure.
I don't know why. I don't know. But they were like, look at this picture. It was a picture of the globe, allegedly, Earth from space.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and it was the same one that I'd seen happen on, oh no, this is too perfect, because I'd already, and I just pointed, I said, look, it says sex in the clouds. They're like, what? I said, look at those clouds there in the Pacific Ocean. It's like, it says sex. And they're like, that's just a coincidence. No, they always do that. They can't help but do that.
Oh, man.
Just like Washington's monument has to be his erect penis and testicle. They can't stop themselves. That's all they ever, everything has to have a sexual reference.
Yeah.
They just can't not do it.
That's true.
You know, and it's like Wayne L. Sexton. The Washington Monument, sex in the clouds.
B.J. Dichter.
B.J. Dichter.
Yeah.
You know? It's always that. And it always will be that. They can't stop themselves, and you just have to be like, you're adorable for this weird perversion you can't help. You know? So, but speaking of weird perversions,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, this is a place of solutions to problems, not just complaining. You know? Not just complaining.
Yeah.
Because that's is the solution to COVID tyranny to be found in gay bar establishments and drag queen nightclubs? Maybe. Am I suggesting that Smokestack become a drag queen? No.
Well, that's good.
No. I don't even think, not to be this isn't an insult. I don't think you'd be a very good one.
I agree. I don't think so
I
either.
don't think you do a good job. I think that your facial structure does not lend itself well to makeup.
No. Drag is not my ministry.
No. But did you know, this is an interesting thing that is true, is that in a lot of places in America, especially in the more conservative spots, in various counties in America that are extremely conservative, selling alcohol on Sundays is illegal.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? But did you also know that some of those same counties have in them nightclubs, often, though not always, gay bars and drag queen places, which are open very late on a Saturday night, to the point where they're open till the wee hours of the morning on Sunday, like 4 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And they sell alcohol in those same places. Now, how do they get away with doing that? Do you have any ideas, any thoughts?
Are they private clubs that you have to be a member of?
Yes.
And there's some legal loophole?
Yes, they're private membership associations. And this is an interesting thing that people, because as I said before on our Sovereign Citizen shows, it is the case that most all of this is voluntary. That is actually true. And there are today, I believe it's called, I forget the name of it, but there are associations of people who run private membership association businesses, which you don't have to do any of the regulations at all, and there's nothing they can do about it. About anything. You can sell alcohol on Sundays. You can not wear masks. You can not use vaccine passports. You can, in many cases, not claim revenue for taxes. You don't have to do any of the things. You know, which is, and you know that this is true, and people are like, this can't be true. And I point out, like, the nightclubs which do it all the time. Like, it's illegal on the books to sell it on Sunday, but if you make yourself a private membership, it's like, well, I guess you can. They do this all the time. And also, you know, guess what the two largest private membership associations in America are?
universities.
No, good guess. The DNC and the RNC.
Oh.
The Democratic National Convention, and those are both private membership associations, which is why they don't have to adhere to any of the laws at all. And they just do whatever, and they don't have anything. This is why they're like, they don't pay all their taxes. Yeah, they don't have to. It's under the law. And people get upset about it. It's like, well, why can't I do that? You can do that. Anybody can do that. You just don't, they just don't want you to know that you can do that.
Interesting.
Right. So like people will be like today, like say I'm a right-wing bodybuilder that hates women. Right? Let's say I'm a gay right-wing bodybuilder. Follows Bronze Age pervert because he likes to look at oiled pictures of men.
Okay.
Right? And I want to have a club of a gym that only handsome men can go to. Right? And I want to run it as a business. Now, a lot of people would say that's actually illegal. You can't discriminate against things. But no. It's only illegal if it's a public business. If you make it a private business, a public membership association, you can make it only handsome men. You can say only men that fit my definition of handsome are allowed in this club and to work out in this gym and to pay me money in this gym. And that's 100% legal. You could make it so that it was only white men if you wanted, or only black men if you're like Milo, a conservative icon. Right? Or you could make it only Hispanic men. Or only men that were over 6'4". You could discriminate in any way you wanted, and it's totally legal and fine.
So this is how country clubs work.
This is how country clubs work. And because it's the same principle as, imagine that we have someone over for dinner. Let's say we have Welder by Trade over for dinner, right? And Welder by Trade comes over, and he says hello, and he's very nice, and we start having dinner, and halfway through the dinner, he gets fired up, and he starts screaming about DeSantis,
Yeah.
And then he pounds the table, and he rips his shirt off, and he reveals that he is also a drag queen.
Oh, no.
Right? Just hypothetically.
Okay.
Right? And he's like, I need to be me, and DeSantis is going to allow me to do that by not making me wear a mask, which conflicts with my fashion choices. Right? Which is his main objection. And I say, this is fine. And I say, I have this bottle of wine here. Maybe this would calm you down. But it was very expensive. He says, oh, well, I would like that bottle of wine. I'll buy it from you. And he hands me some money and I hand him the wine. That is considered legally a private business exchange. It happened it wasn't in the public sphere. And that's fine. I could sell him that on Sunday in any county in the country. And all a private membership association is doing is expanding that concept to an unlimited number of people. Right? Because when you enter a private membership association, you agree to operate under a certain, we talked about this in the Sovereign Citizen show, under a different trust. You agree to operate under a different set of rules here, which forgoes your recourse to the quote-unquote public because it's not happening in the public. So like what the public really is, is the set of laws, rules, and standards that we have to interact in commerce with other people without any, it's the default rule set, without any modifications. But you can both agree to modify those rules for your specific business transactions at any time. And it's totally legal and it's fine. And so you can make whatever you can, if you wanted to do a business and you're like, this grocery store doesn't do masks or vaccines in the heart of San Francisco, or the most draconian place in America, you could be like, well, we're a private membership association. You have to agree to our charter and sign it to join. And then now this is the only people who can buy and sell here. And that's totally fine. And so it's all voluntary. And this has been an option the entire time. No one in the conservative media has ever brought it up because they don't want to. Because they want they enjoy being victimized. They enjoy. It's sort of like a weird sexual fetish thing, really. Where like the progressives are like, "You're gonna do it," and they're like, "No, don't make me do it." That's what it is. And like, "Oh, you're gonna do it." Like, "Oh, I can't believe you're forcing me to do it." That's what it is. It's this weird. I swear it's like that sort of weird creepiness, because there's no reason you had to do any of it ever.
Yeah.
And they could have told you about this stuff all the time. It's just. So anyway, this is so this is why if you open your heart and you have compassion for all people, you can find solutions to problems in all places, like in the drag queen community. Yeah? Because
well, I mean, it's interesting because in the places like blue law dry counties, a club of drag queens is probably going to be not in the majority, not they're not welcome in polite society, so they have to make their own spaces and their own associations and sort of police their boundaries and whatever if they want to continue existing. And guess what? We're now, people like us are in that boat. Like
now we're the
drag queens, right? Yeah, and
everyone listening. You're now a drag queen.
Yeah, and so yeah, we got to change our thinking. We don't control the culture. We don't make the prevailing rules, but if we make our own culture and our own space and our own associations and police our own boundaries, then we can make our own rules for ourselves.
You can be as racist as you want in America. You really can. You just have to have you have to set it up legally in the proper way. You can make your own Azov's battalion. You can bring that to America.
Well, it's funny because you can ask a progressive why there are still in like New England states, there are still like country clubs with only white members and they don't let Jews in and all this stuff. And and they'll scratch their head about how that can be possible. And then all their political leaders are members in these things. Yeah.
In their head, the only way they can justify it, and this is because they say, well, the white people obviously control the politics of that state, and they don't want to crack down on it, so they let it go, even though it's technically against the books. But that's not true in the slightest. It's completely legal, and the rich people of the country that do this all the time, don't want to tell the plebs about these loopholes that they can use to not do things.
Yeah, and it should be legal. That's the thing.
Right.
Like, it shouldn't be illegal to have a little racist country club, okay? Because the same allowances that allow for that allow for a lot of good things. And if your legal system allows for the destruction of the racist country club, it also allows for the destruction of my church.
I'm going to start a racist country club. It only allows in Jews and Ukrainians. That's it. And I know you're a Ukrainian. Ukrainian is defined as having a swastika tattoo.
Well, like, what are historically black colleges and universities? What are those?
Exactly.
That's just a racist country club for black people. I don't care. I think they should exist. I'm glad they exist. Let them keep existing. I hope they do well. But if your criteria of letting people in there is that they are black, that's racist. By definition,
and good,
like, fine,
and good, yeah,
go for it. Because I don't want to go off on a huge tangent here, but
no,
the canard, this whole nonsense about racism, we got to fix racism, all this stuff. It's not a real problem. People are mean to each other and treat each other badly for all sorts of reasons, and you're not going to fix it by making some big stink about racism or picking one little thing. Like, get a life, people. For real. Just get a life.
Or don't.
Solve your own problems and make your own life for yourself, and nobody's stopping you.
Yeah, nobody's stopping you.
It's just like, racism isn't real in the way that they say it is. It's like, yes, people are unkind to each other. Sometimes it's because they don't like their way they look or whatever, but it doesn't matter. They're always going to be.
Right.
And that's not you're the means that you're undertaking to try to fix it are stupid and self-injurious, They will not bring about the results that you think you're after. And they may just destroy society altogether. All they do is empower wicked men to oppress you. Like actual oppression. Like, hey, you have to wear this mask and get vaccinated or you'll lose your job. Where do you think that power comes from? Like if the government has the power to enforce anti-racism, they also have the power to make you get vaccinated or freaking force you to have an abortion or something. Like it's all the same power.
Yeah, which is why we need to talk about the Congo and Moquila Mbembe.
What?
The remnant dinosaur of the Congo.
Sweet.
Right? So, and that was a good segue. Good job.
Thanks.
Good job to us. We need to have a segue sound, like segue.
Transition.
Something like that. But anyway, so the all that aside, the more interesting thing is, are there still living dinosaurs? Because I think that would change a lot of stuff. I mean, the answer one is were dinosaurs ever real? I'm not sure. We did a dinosaur show, and a lot of the dinosaurs that we have in museums are just based on like 2 bones they found, and then they just reconstructed the rest.
True.
Right. So, I don't know. A. B. If there were dinosaurs, then yes, there are remnant dinosaurs, and they're called crocodiles. Although not really; those are actually prehistoric lizards. Right. The difference between a prehistoric lizard and a dinosaur is very simple. If the lizard's legs are up underneath it like a mammal, it's a dinosaur. If they're splayed out to the side like a lizard or a crocodile, it's a lizard.
Oh,
that's the main difference.
I didn't know that. That's okay. It's helpful.
Yeah, exactly. So the alligator and the crocodile would be they're not remnant dinosaurs, they are prehistoric lizards. Now, the idea of a remnant dinosaur is, well, it's exactly what it sounds like. Somewhere in the world, there's still some specimen of a dinosaur species roaming around, Lost World style, in some crevice of the earth, right? And it's still there. Maybe there's still a small population. Loch Ness Monster being probably the most famous of this. Right, because it's typically assumed to be an alleged surviving plesiosaurus. Right, how a plesiosaurus, which is a cold-blooded reptile, could survive in a very cold lake for many thousands of years after it supposedly went extinct, that has no connection to the outside sea, could happen. Let's leave that aside for a minute.
He's chilling. He's cold-blooded. He's like a frog. They just go under a rock all winter. Maybe Nessie is just like sort of freezes down there. Yeah.
Stasis. And then every now and then when it warms up, that'd be interesting. Is that one thing that we might ask is Nessie sighted way more often in the summer?
Yeah.
And if so, that would be an interesting data point.
Right.
But there's also Champ, the Lake Champlain monster. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar?
I've heard of Champ. Yeah.
Yeah, Lake Champlain is a lake that sits like on the intersection of Vermont, New York, and Canada. They have a plesiosaurus there too. Or Ogopogo, right? Everyone knows Ogopogo.
What's Ogopogo?
He's another plesiosaurus in Lake Okanagan in Canada.
Oh, cool.
Right. So plesiosauruses, these water long-necked brontosauruses with flippers, are probably the most common remnant dinosaur in the world. Lots of people in the U.S., in Canada, in Scotland, in all over, in a lot in Africa, have these legends of a long serpentine-necked reptile creature which swims around in the water, which is very large, bigger than any possible thing. Now, could it be that these myths are like propagated because one time somebody saw a misplaced anaconda or something? Maybe. Maybe a guy had a private collection of animals, and he had an anaconda that got too big, and he just threw it out in Lake Champlain, and that someone saw that and thought it was it could be. You could come up with why these are there, but nonetheless, these stories are pretty consistent and they're pretty global of the remnant plesiosaur. Probably the most common sort of cryptid outside of the ape-man Bigfoot thing.
Yeah.
Right. Now, secondly, as far as remnant dinosaurs go, and neither the plesiosaur nor this is technically a dinosaur. Again, I know for all of our paleontologist purists out there who listen to this show and email me constantly when I get something wrong about dinosaurs, I get it. Calm down. Calm down, right? But for the common people, these are dinosaurs. It's your job to educate the public on what is and not. It's not mine. See? Okay. If the common man calls him a dinosaur, I'm going to call him a dinosaur.
Fair enough.
Okay? Okay, Bill, put it with your email. All right. Now, so the pterodactyl is the second most. And these creatures have been seen from anywhere from Texas to Africa. People see a giant flying. Now, in full disclosure, as a young child, probably about 7, I myself saw a pterodactyl.
Sweet.
I was out by a body of water, just sort of sitting there. I was going to fish. And a big shadow passed over my head. And I looked up, and what appeared to be a giant flying something swooped overhead. Something large enough it looked like it could pick me up. Flew away. Now, is this the misrememberings of an overactive imagination at seeing a giant eagle? Very possibly, right? However, maybe not. I don't know. It was very large in my memory and very sort of pterodactyl shaped. So I have some sympathy to this. But nonetheless, these are seen pretty much all over. Pretty much all over is the plesiosaurus and then the pterodactyl. Now, Moquela Mimbe in the Congo is the best known true remnant dinosaur because it's supposedly a brontosaurus living in the Congolese jungle.
No kidding.
Right. And everyone in the Congo thinks this is real, by the way. There's no one, if you go to Congo and you talk to the locals, in between them trying to rape and kill each other and shoot you. Because they're in a constant civil war. Isn't that interesting, by the way, as an aside? What is the most deadly war since World War II?
I'm going to go with the African War.
Yeah, the Great African War. No one's ever heard of it.
But it's been going on for how... I mean, it's still kind of going on, right? I know. No one in the West ever is like, oh, World War II was so awful. It's like the Great African War was almost as bad. No one has ever mentioned it at all. It's just, this Western Eurocentrism is just eating at me again. Anyway, so in the Congo, when they go around, the soldiers there have all talked about Moquela Mimbe. Everybody's seen it. All the tribes people, the people living in the villages, they're like, yeah, oh yeah, we know about it. We know. And in fact, members of a German expedition to Congo in 1913 were the first white men to also say they saw Moquela Mimbe. Right, so it isn't simply a local legend. It isn't. So, and then there was in the 1960s. This is the most recent big sighting of him. Mm-hmm.
There was a 17-year-old named Nicholas and I may not pronounce it, Mondogo. He observed what appeared to be the neck of Moquela Mimbe coming through the trees.
Ooh.
And all the townspeople, when he ran to tell them, came and ran to see what he was talking about, and they all said it was a sighting of over 70 people. And they were like, yeah, we saw it too. And then it went off into the dense jungle.
Whoa.
And of all the places in the world where a dinosaur could be and remain undetected, the Congo's up there.
Yeah.
The Congo's up there. This inspired the expedition of a semi-famous expedition, really, by Dr. Roy Mackal in the 1980s. He went through several expeditions, actually. He was this guy, I believe he was a paleontologist, and he was like, wouldn't I be the greatest paleontologist ever if I found a living dinosaur? Right? And so he was like, maybe I will, because I'm not making a big splash digging up bones. I haven't found anything interesting that way. Maybe I'll go find a living one. So he had some expeditions to and he gathered up enough funds to go traipse around the middle of Africa looking for the dinosaur. Now, he never found it, but he did find that tons of people there. He collected tons of stories from the locals, and they all over Central Africa described sort of the same sort of creature that people had seen. So maybe that's a bit of a something. I don't know. And it's not that it's not that, well, what would you say? Impossible.
No,
because
I don't find it hard to believe at all.
Right. It's not that impossible. I mean, I find it probably harder to believe than you do. But it is not that impossible because this has happened before. Like there was this fish named the coelacanth.
Yep.
Prehistoric fish. It was believed to be extinct at the end of the Cretaceous period. And a guy named Marjorie Latimer, who was a curator of South Africa's London Museum, 1938. So he put displays of prehistoric fish up.
Mm-hmm. He
went to the African fish market in Central Africa, and he found on for sale the coelacanth. He was like, "What?" And they're like, "Yeah, this is just this fish here." And so they went to this whole study, and they found there's still this prehistoric fish swimming around in off the coast of Somalia.
It's funny to me that they found it at a fish market. So African dudes are eating this fish that British scientists say are extinct and study in museums. It's hilarious.
Which is probably what's happening with brontosauruses. Somewhere in Nigeria, they're having brontosaurus steaks right now.
Just like on the Flintstones.
Just like on the Flintstones, exactly. There was also the okapi, which you can see now at zoos, which is like that sort of short-necked giraffe thing with the zebra stripes.
Yeah.
Which is a ridiculous animal. It's like, are you a giraffe, a horse, or a zebra? Pick. Uses. That was thought to be extinct until it was rediscovered in Zaire in 1901, right? And there are other examples of animals we think are extinct, and then they aren't.
I think the only hurdle to overcome here with this one is that it's just so big.
So large.
And also the reptiles have had a harder time reappearing than, things like fish or mammals that we thought were extinct.
Yes. And they would, unless there's a thing where sometimes there's just spontaneous generation of creatures.
Well, I think some of this can maybe also be explained in neotenous and gregarious forms, as we've covered on show before.
That could be also, as we talked about on that show.
Yep.
But like I said, still to this day, nobody knows where eels come from. So, and they're there, but no one's ever found the place where eels breed. So, who knows? Maybe they just come out. Maybe they just spawn out of the depths of darkness. Maybe if you make it dark and cold enough, an eel just emerges. I don't know. So maybe if you get the conditions right, a dinosaur just out of the plant life.
Well,
that's as good a theory of how life comes about as evolution.
Yeah, well, maybe better.
Yeah, exactly.
But in History of the Kings of Britain, when they talk about the dragons coming out, the deal was that they were under a lake down in the mud, and they drained the lake, and I guess the sun warmed the soil up, and dragons came out of the mud.
Right.
And that's not, I mean, you can say, oh, that's just weird Merlin stories from the Middle Ages, but if you know about how a lot of reptiles operate, that's what snapping turtles do. They go live in the mud at the bottom of the lake until it's warm enough for their metabolism to get them up and moving around, and then they come up and move around.
Yeah. Exactly. So
it's biologically consistent from what we know about reptiles that should be the case. And it was recorded when was the History of Kings of Britain recorded? It's solid Middle Age writings. Yeah. So how would they know about anyway? Go ahead.
No, you're 100% right. Now, and the thing that we're going to talk about today is that the Old West of America was filled with people seeing such creatures. Now, Did newspapers at the time engage in yellow journalism?
Perhaps a bit.
A bit. They were bored. They lived on the frontier. They needed something to talk about sometimes. And so sometimes they just made stuff up. And they admit to doing that. And sometimes they would make stuff up. And then later, like a year later, they'd publish a thing like, gotcha, that was a made-up story. Now, that said, not all of them are probably made up. Some of them are probably real accounts of people who something happened to. Is there any way to is there any way to prove these stories? No, but you can corroborate them. And that's what the author tried to do, using basically 3 metrics. 1, are the people given in the story real people? Can we find their records somewhere else? Mm-hmm. Or this made up names? That would be helpful. 2, how well do the creatures described match up with today's known idea of dinosaurs?
Okay.
Because in the 1800s, the idea of dinosaurs was very different. So, like, there was an encounter in the 1930s with what some consider a baby T-Rex. And it's described as a creature running with its head in line with its tail and running across the ground. This is totally different from how paleontologists thought T-Rexes would have walked and lived in the 1930s. They had it like they're dragging their tail across the ground and they were walking sort of upright, like a Godzilla.
Yeah.
The forward-leaning stance of a dinosaur was not a thing until like the 1970s. So he saw what appeared to be the modern understanding of dinosaur anatomy in the 1930s. So maybe that gives it some credence. Another question he says that he would ask is, if it doesn't match any known dinosaur, does it match other cryptids seen in the world? Like, is it more valid if it's less than a one-off?
Mm-hmm.
Like if a cryptid in New Mexico closely matched a cryptid in Africa, maybe that gives a little bit of credence to something.
Sure, yeah.
So, when available, all of the accounts in this book were asked the following questions. 1, were the witnesses real? 2, does the monster indicate behavior befitting a dinosaur? Which is a great thing to ask a judge and jury. Did it indicate behavior befitting a dinosaur? 3, does the creature correspond with other cryptids, and so on, right? And are the locations talked about in the article real? Like, if they describe like going into a cave, is there actually a cave in that area? That would be some ways you can weed out the yellow journalism thing. And the most famous of all the cowboy and dinosaur stories that exists, and if you have even a passing interest in the paranormal or the weird, you've heard about it, is the pterodactyl of Tombstone. The great story of the pterodactyl of Tombstone, Arizona. The same tombstone that had the Wyatt Earp.
I've never heard of this.
I know. So, in the late 1800s, here's the basic story. Two cowboys riding across the Halchuika Desert come across a giant reptile with wings struggling to become airborne. They shoot it with their rifles, kill it, take it back to Tombstone, and nail it up on the side of the barn. That's the basic story, right? Those are the most commonly repeated highlights. But it didn't actually happen just like that. If you actually go back and read the article and stuff, that's years of misremembering the story and bungling repeated it and making it fantastical than it was.
Okay.
However, there is things. So there's actually like truth behind this story. It's the same. Keep in mind, it's the same tombstone made famous by the 1881 gunfight at the OK Corral by Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. Also Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, and pterodactyl. That's the real American history they want to hide from.
Why didn't they put the pterodactyl in the movie with Val Kilmer?
Yeah, I know.
I feel cheated.
So here's the original article that came out in the Tombstone newspaper, The Epitaph, in 1890. Right? Found in the desert, a strange winged monster discovered and killed in the Hiawatha Desert. So the winged monster, resembling a huge alligator with an extremely elongated tail and an immense pair of wings, was found in the desert between Whetstone and Tombstone, and the Hiawatha Mountains, last Sunday by 2 ranchers who were returning to Tombstone from the Hiawathas. The creature was evidently greatly exhausted by a long flight, and when discovered, was able to fly but a short distance. After the initial shock had passed, the two men who were on horseback, armed with Winchester rifles, regained their courage and pursued the monster, and after an exciting chase of several miles, succeeded in getting near enough to open fire with their rifles and wound it. The creature turned on the men, but owing to its exhaustion, was unable to get a hit on them directly, and they were able to keep out of its way. They fired off more shots until the monster fell, partly rolled over, and remained motionless. The men cautiously approached, their horses snorting with terror, and they found the creature was dead. They then proceeded to make an examination and found it measured 92 feet in length, the greatest diameter of which was 50 inches. The monster had 2 feet, those being situated a short distance in the front of the wings, where the wings were joined to the body. The head, as near as they could judge, was 8 feet long, the jaws being thickly set with strong, sharp teeth. The eyes were as large as dinner plates, protruded about halfway from the head. They had difficulty measuring the wings as they were folded under the body, but finally got one straightened out sufficiently to get a measurement of 78 feet, making the total length from tip to tip about 160 feet. The skin of the body was comparatively smooth and easily penetrated by a bullet. The wings were composed of a thick, nearly transparent membrane devoid of feathers or hair, as was the entire body. The men cut off a small portion of the tip of one wing and took it home with them. Late last night, one of them arrived in this city for supplies and to make necessary preparations to skin the creature, when the hide will be sent east for examination by the eminent scientists of today. Unfortunately, there was no follow-up articles, so we don't know what happened to this animal's body or remains. Right? So that's an interesting story. Two guys kill a winged alligator.
Well,
in the
it
desert.
strikes me how
It's
huge it
160
was.
feet long.
Yeah, like
What?
that thing was massive.
Right. That's the biggest problem with the original article, is the mass. I mean, other than the claimed existence of a flying crocodile. If you accept that, the biggest problem is that is gigantic, right? The two largest species of Petrodon that we've ever found, one had a wingspan of about 20 feet, and then there's the Quetzalcoatlus, which is this Mexican one, had a wingspan of about 40. So that's a fourth of the size of this thing.
Right.
Right? So that's the biggest issue. But having admitted that, are there any other strong points in this thing's favor? Well, maybe a couple. We'll start with Horace Bell, the first man who resurrected that story in his 1930 book On the Old West Coast. Bell had been an adventurer and a scholar, in addition to being a soldier, a lawyer, a filibuster, a Los Angeles rancher, and a newspaper editor and journalist. Many hats. So it recounted his various adventures in California in this book, and one of which included hearing the tale of a certain lake monster. You see, far before the Tombstone pterodactyl story, there was a tale of a flying monster that very much matched the description of the monster living in that was killed in Tombstone, living in Elizabeth Lake, right? And so the Elizabeth Lake monster was seen for many years until the last sighting in 1890, when it was seen flying east and was never seen again. And then it disappeared. That sort of interesting in that it flies east towards Tombstone, and then that same year, such a monster is seen in Arizona that has the same description and is shot dead.
Huh.
So, that's interesting.
Okay, yeah.
It's an interesting thing. But then the Tombstone story gained more credibility when a quote-unquote non-embellished real version of the story surfaced. So, one of the alleged ranchers came forward in the 1930s, and his name was I forget his, but he said this. He said, the researcher who interviewed this guy, and his name Joshua Hawley, and he said, "There's one strange thread of the story that leaves some plausibility to it. One old cowboy was there, and he decided to speak out, and told me that he was one of the ranchers that shot at the creature. But they misled the story so badly. Basically, him and his friend chased the creature as it flew in the air, but the horses were getting spooked and turned around on them, and they couldn't go back to where they were chasing it. And the creature, and they were also a little frightened. The creature was eventually able to take off, flew away. They never shut it down. They never killed it." So that's allegedly the account of an actual rancher from the town.
Is this Tombstone or is this California?
This is Tombstone.
Okay. So the story about them shooting it down turns out in this account not to be real.
He said, listen, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. What really happened, and this is a great persuasion technique, by the way. It's the same thing as haggling, is you start off strong and then you work people back down to something.
Right.
Right? And so you say, this is like you're saying, there's WMDs and nuclear bombs. You say, well, but no, but we still need to go there. After you got people fired up to go there.
Yeah.
So that may be what all this is. But so there's this big fantastical story, and then the guy's like, you guys, you fake news. Fake news. No, I didn't shoot down a pterodactyl. No, I just followed the pterodactyl. Tried to shoot it. But it didn't happen, right? This old rancher also said that the newspaper greatly embellished what they reported as the lengths of the monster. He said that their wingspan was only about 20 to 30 feet, which is the perfect measurements for a pterodactyl.
There you go.
So
it also doesn't make sense that they would be able to kill something that big with Winchester rifles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If it was 160 feet,
right, not going to happen.
That would be ridiculous. So that's the famous pterodactyl of Tombstone. Now that is famous because there's an alleged picture floating around somewhere in the universe of this creature, and multiple paranormal researchers who are, of course, above reproach and never lie, from the golden age of ufology and stuff, the 1950s and 60s and 70s, say they saw it and they just couldn't find it anywhere, including John Keel, arguably the most influential, the author of the Mothman Prophecies, arguably the most influential paranormal researcher, who generally does not make things up and lie. That's true. He said, I know I saw it. It was someone showed it to me, and I think it was Ivan Sanderson showed it to me. And he said, I don't know where it is now, but he said, I know I saw this picture. And that was eventually the first proposal of what would later become known as the Mandela effect, which was that, I believe it was Ivan Sanderson said, well, it was there, but reality shifted and now it's not anymore. Which is a great excuse.
That is a great one.
It was there, but Mandela effect, and now it isn't. You know? So, whether or not the Tombstone pterodactyl actually happened, it gave birth to a lot of things, including possibly the first idea of a Mandela effect, which would later have the name of Nelson Mandela attached to it. So, the year was 1890, right? When that happened. But that was not the first time such a flying monster had been seen in the Old West. No, sir! On St. Patrick's Day, ironically, in 1882, two men named Thomas Campbell and Joseph Howard saw a flying snake.
Whoa.
I know St. Patrick's Day, ironically, snakes. Actually, they said it looked like an alligator with wings again. And this was recorded in the Gridley Herald, which is the newspaper. It said, about 4 o'clock Friday afternoon last, while at work, we were startled by the sound of many wings flapping in the air. Looking up, we perceived passing over our heads, not more than 40 feet above the treetops, a creature that looked something like a crocodile. It was, to the best of our judgment, not less than 18 feet in length, and would measure 2 feet across the body from the head to the tail, a distance of probably 12 feet. The tail was about 4 foot long and tapered from the body to a point probably 8 inches wide. The head was in the neighborhood of 2 feet in length, and the jaws, for its mouth was open, could not have been less than 16 inches and 2 feet from the body. As near as we could see, the wings were formed similar to a duck's foot. On the underside of the body, we counted 12 feet, 6 on each side. Mr. Howard fired one barrel of a shotgun at the monster and writes, it uttered a cry similar to that of a calf and a bear combined, but gave no sign of being inconvenienced or injured. In fact, when the shot struck, we heard the bullets rattle as though striking against a thin piece of sheet iron. The object was seen by a number of Chinamen working near us, who were badly frightened and fled back to the cabin. So Chinamen are afraid of flying alligators.
Good to know.
Something you can learn.
Yeah, might be helpful in future.
Say, if you're ever attacked by Chinamen, say, flying alligator! And they'll all spook and run away. Especially if it has... Now, to me, the thing about that one is that the alleged alligator has 12 feet.
Yeah, that's a little weird.
Ridiculous. That can't be. I mean, or maybe not. Maybe it can be. Maybe this was a ancestral Chinese dragon spirit coming to give a message to the Chinamen who were there, and that's why they were spooked. Because they believe in flying dragons in the traditional Chinese culture.
Mm-hmm. That's why they ran.
So
it's blood memory.
That's why they ran. It's blood memory. Because, the Chinese people believe they actually are children of the dragon. They have dragons.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Even Xi Jinping talks about that. The ancient mythology of China is that they are part dragon.
Wow.
Which is, so maybe that's why. There was also the Serpent of San Marcal in the Lloranda del Muerto, or the Dead Man's Route. I probably butchered that. Is a notorious stretch of desert located in the Himbrelo Basin of southern New Mexico. It runs about 90 miles north of the ruins of Fort Selden and is known as the hardest stretch of desert along the El Camino Real de Tierra Adventuro, traveled by the conquistadors. It was named the Dead Man's Route because a German man in 1670, how a German man was there in 1670 is never clear. Right?
He's on vacation.
But according to what?
He's on vacation.
There weren't even German people then.
He's probably running around naked like Germans do all over the place.
Well, interestingly, you should note he was there because he was allegedly accused of witchcraft.
Also, very Germanic thing to do.
You're right. His name was Bernardo Gruber, and Gruber fled across this stretch of desert, not yet named, where he perished due to the unforgiving conditions. And so it was named the Dead Man Route after him. And since then, that stretch of thing has been the theater of many a mystery. Among them are the lost treasure of Victero Peak, which you still may be able to find, by the way, and the still unsolved disappearance of a lawyer named A.J. Fountain, who has gone missing. And according to an obscure newspaper article from 1888, a dinosaur sighting. So in January 27th, 1888, the Helena Independent reported this story out of San Marcal, New Mexico. Mexico's prize snake. It is a monster indeed, and it abides in an extinct crater. Now, an extinct crater means an old non-active volcano crater.
Got it.
So that confused me. I was like, what do you mean by an extinct crater? It's a no longer active volcano crater.
There's a lot of those in New Mexico.
A lot of those in New Mexico. The article says, this section of country about San Marcal has been aroused of late by reports of Mexicans who state that near an extinct crater, near the plain known as Lloranda del Muerto, is the abode of a monster. Some say it is 100 feet long and about 2 feet in circumference. The Mexicans are now afraid to venture within miles of the crater. Mr. Alexander, who owns some mining property in that part of the country, says he saw the serpent himself while crossing the Lloranda on his way to his mines. He was about halfway across the plain, jogging leisurely behind his burro, dreaming of the immense wealth he hoped to realize from his property, when suddenly the burro stopped, erected its long ears, wheeled around quickly, and made the mad stampede in the opposite direction. Mr. Alexander was at a loss to account for this strange freak of the burro, and was about to start in pursuit of the runaway, when he chanced to look ahead. Then his eyes gazed upon the monster. He was so struck with fear at first that he says his nerves had become completely paralyzed. His hair stood on end, and move he could not. He was rooted to the spot, and his eyes were fixed upon the serpent. It was about 1/4 of a mile from him, and was traveling in the opposite direction, toward the crater. He said it appeared to be 60 feet in length, but what surprised him the most was the queer proportions of the creature. The foreparts were of enormous size, its head being fully as large as a barrel. A few feet behind the creature's head were large scales were visible, which glittered in the sun like polished shields on its back. Further back were 2 huge claws on either side, about 2 feet apart, which were all the monster had in the shape of feet. The rest of its body was comparatively small and tapering to the end of its tail. It traveled at a rapid gait, sometimes rearing its whole body up from the ground, and walked on its 4 claws. He watched till it disappeared over a little hill, and then he started to look for his burrow. The Mexicans have the most deadly fear of the crater, and will not venture within miles of it, there being a popular tradition among them that it is the abode of the terrible serpent. The Mexicans asserted that on one occasion a descent of the crater was made by 3 men, and none of them returned, and it is generally believed they were devoured by the monster. So that bears a vaguely similar description to a Stegosaurus.
Gnarly.
Like the shields on its back.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, it does say it walked on 4 claws, which is strange.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that means. Does it mean there were just claws and no feet? Did it just mean...
Maybe they were trying to describe something like a talon, like you would say.
Yeah, I think... Yeah, so the portions of the body are curious. It seems an overly top-heavy animal. But maybe, like the tombstone pterodactyl, this animal is also exaggerated in size by the writer of the article.
Sure.
I mean, 100 foot in length seems excessive for ruminant dinosaurs. Stegosaurus has got about 30. And so, I mean, it sort of sounds too good to be true, like a miner is going to the desert and he sees a dinosaur going into an extinct volcanic crater, you know. But there are things that line up with the San Marcal monster. First of all, are the locations and fantastical settings real? And the answer is yes, right down to the volcanic crater. Because the volcanic crater mentioned is probably Kilbourne Hole, which is between the Portillo Mountains and the Rio Grande in southern Ana County. And it's a mar, or a depression, or a pit created by a volcanic explosion. You know, I think it's near El Paso, really. It's like 30 miles west of El Paso.
Okay.
Kilbourne Hole. It's about 400 foot deep and about 4,000 feet wide. It's a big hole, and you go down in it, and there's all these little caves. Interestingly, and make me suspicious of it, NASA allegedly used this hole to train Apollo astronauts in. NASA geologically trained the Apollo astronauts in April and November of 1969, June 1970, and January and December of 1971. They would use this training on the moon. That doesn't make any sense. Pete Conrad, Alan Bean, Alan Shepard, Edgar Mitchell, David Scott, James Irwin, and John and Charlie Duke, as well as Jack Schmidt and Gene Kernan, all Apollo astronauts, allegedly had to be taken into this volcanic crater where this dinosaur was to train to be on the moon. It's another part of the moon.
Seems
Every time you look, the more you look at the moon missions, the more nonsensical they become. What would that do?
Yeah.
Why would you need to...
Seems a bit out of the way.
A bit out of the way, and they're like, well, we needed somewhere that was like the moon. What are you talking about?
Dusty.
Like
there's dusty, rocky places elsewhere.
And what good would that do?
I mean, maybe to like learn how to walk in your suits, maybe? I don't know.
It seems suspicious. So it's likely Kilbourne Hole is where that is. It's a crater believed to be between 24,000 and 100,000 years old. Sort of elliptical in shape. And it's also rich in minerals there, so it makes sense that someone was going there to mine.
Mm-hmm.
It's now a national landmark controlled by the National Park Service. Conveniently, if they were going to try and hide dinosaurs, they would take over it, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
You ever think about that? Skeptics? Ever think about that?
I'm not real sympathetic to the whole argument that the National Park Service is really just trying to hide cryptids. Because if that were true, they wouldn't be letting people in there all the time.
They only let you into the parts where the cryptids aren't. Game, set, match. Checkmate.
Okay.
The crater could have also been Aden Crater, which is another sort of volcanic crater not too far away. That crater is about the size of the Sun Bowl Stadium, Texas, in El Paso. Adding to the flavor of the story is that in the area of the Kilbourne Hole, there are deep caverns that are hazardous to hikers. People could get lost and die in them. Further, in one of the caves, a prehistoric ground sloth was exhumed.
What? Cool.
So, maybe it's a place where old things like to hang out.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, Stegosaurus-like creatures have also been sighted in the Congo, in the same area as the Mokele Mbembe. By documented by Roy Mackal himself, which we talked about earlier. He says that he went there and he took a dinosaur book to the tribes, and he had all these pictures and drawings of dinosaurs. And he would show them to the villagers, and he'd be like, "Have you seen this one? Have you seen this one?" Imagine that as your job. You have a kid's book of dinosaurs, and you go to black people in Africa, and you start pointing and say, "Have you seen this one? How about a velociraptor? No. How about
you can get a grant? You can get a grant for anything, man."
Yeah, I mean, and so he's doing this, and he says, without exception, they would pick out either the Apatosaurus and say, "Oh yeah, Bukaleka Makimbe," or this other one whose name I can't pronounce. I think it's Mimbulu, Mimbulu, Mimbulu. It's the same phrase 3 times. Mimbulu, Mimbulu, Mimbulu. And this was the creature that they would point to when he came across the picture of a Stegosaurus, and they would point to it and say, "Mimbulu, Mimbulu, Mimbulu." So, maybe, it means more or less like, I think it means, and everyone seems to do this, as they call big lizard snakes.
Mm-hmm.
This name seems to mean something like big snake.
Okay.
So, in his book, A Living Dinosaur, Mackal writes, of all the animals described to us, this one was the most mysterious. It is significant, although we have less descriptive information about the creature than any other in the dossier. It does happen to have been observed by an American missionary. Almost without exception, anecdotal evidence about the other unknown animals in Africa come to us from pygmies or the Congolese. No matter how reliable these informants, the information they provided has obviously been filtered through vast cultural differences. So, maybe there was a Stegosaurus in El Paso, or outside of El Paso. I can't prove there wasn't. Can you?
No.
True. Can't prove it wasn't, right? Then it's true. That's how things work.
I'm going hiking out there later in the year. I'm going to look for a dinosaur.
Yeah, exactly. Now another interesting bit of that is there's some cave paintings, some petroglyphs in the area that are quite old from like the Native Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one there which could be argued to be a giant lizard.
Ah.
So it could also be argued to be any number of other things, because it's like an ink blot test. But when I went out to the desert, they showed me some petroglyphs, and I was like, when the lady was showing us, I was like, why is that one a UFO with someone being taken up in a tractor beam? And she was like, well, they're not sure what that is. I'm like, that's clearly a saucer with like a ray coming down of it, and there's a guy like in the middle of it. She was like, well, I don't. Yeah, so I don't know. There's a plethora of dinosaur stories in the Old West. A theropod may have killed a child. We don't know, and we can't know really. And is it beyond us to know? Probably. Should we even be asking these questions?
This sounds like a great book. What was the title of it? I want to link it.
Cowboys and Saurians. Saurian. Saurian is a broad description of any large reptile. So that includes both dinosaurs and prehistoric reptiles, because he wanted to be technically accurate. Not everything seen here is technically a dinosaur.
Was there a different book, The Real Cowboys and Dinosaurs?
The Real Cowboys and Aliens.
Okay, so by the guy that wrote The Real Cowboys and Aliens?
He wrote The Real Cowboys and Aliens, and he said, I thought about calling this The Real Cowboys and Dinosaurs, but then he said, I knew that paleontologists like Bill, tells me, would say, Apatosauruses aren't really dinosaurs. And so to avoid that, he made a very technically accurate thing. And I can't blame him for that, because if you ever do a show online, you find that any slight technical deviation you make is called out by a billion, dinosaur Nazis.
Such is the curse of the internet.
Such is the curse of the internet. It used to be it was just grammar Nazis. But now we have dinosaur Nazis, we have Nazis, we have gender Nazis, we have vaccine Nazis.
Yep.
We have Trump Nazis. I guess, I don't know. We just have all the kinds of Nazis. Everyone's just a Nazi. A Nazi just means you care about something enough to correct people.
Kind of defined it down a bit, didn't they?
A Nazi just means you care about something enough for people to get it right, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I remember in the golden age of the New Atheist movement, the number one thing you could do on the internet is point out when someone spell check incorrectly used Y-O-U-R instead of Y-O-U''re. And that was the most important thing that could be done. People spent all day doing that.
That sounds like something a new atheist would do.
You would post something and then they would post your star asterisk for the corrected version. That would be their entire... They dismissed your entire thing you just said.
Yep.
Based on the fact that when you were putting it in on your phone, it went in the other way. Right?
I get the impression you've run afoul of this a time or two.
And good. You know, those people deserve the Azov Battalion. You know? And that's what they're going to get. And they deserve to be masked and be run over by a plesiosaurus. In my future America, there are people, the vaccinated and the unvaccinated fight with Winchesters upon the backs of apatosauruses.
Awesome.
The Old West. And one of them holds aloft the standard of George Floyd, who has achieved messianic status. And miracles are attributed to him every day. When someone gets the vaccine and they get COVID still, they survive. They no longer say, thank goodness I had the vaccine. Or it would have been worse. They say, praise be to George Floyd. Gave me this miracle and let me survive the deadly racist virus caused by Trump. And the other side, they hold up a big standard of Steven Crowder in a dress. And they say, we're not racist or transphobic, you are. All of the people leading the right-wing brigade are transsexuals who have succeeded in getting gold medals in women's sports. And they all, they're there, but they all have forsaken the need to even try to pass as a woman because it's internal. Right? And so they're all like heavy mustachioed, dressed like the Village People. They're all women. This is the frontline defense against progressivism. That's the future that I think we all want. And we're going to get there, you know, God willing. We're going to get there. We're heading there now, and it's a bold new world.
Vote Sumo 2024.
Vote me. Actually, you know, if I was going to run, my legitimate political platform would be the reinstatement of corporal punishment.
Yeah.
Because I'd be like, listen, this appeals to everyone. People, you can beat people.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone loves that.
Yep.
Also, it's justice reform, because what's better for people, being locked away for 10 years for having a bag of marijuana, or just getting a few lashes, and then it's over.
Yeah, I agree with that completely.
Then it's over.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like so... It's makes so much more sense to just put people in the stocks and throw tomatoes at them for an afternoon.
Is that Philippines where they put you in like the spanking shell? And it's like
we need to bring back the spanking shell.
It's like a plastic thing that goes over your back, but the butt of it is cut out like chaps or something. And they beat you with a cane in public.
I mean, what would be more appealing to the modern American than a justice reform system that involves like cheekless chaps?
All the drag queen families can take their kids every Saturday to go watch the public canings.
The public canings, then you throw, and if you want to keep it PG, you throw tomatoes at the head side.
Yeah.
You don't have to look at the butt. This is how we compromise and we move forward in America. We compromise. Solutions, not pollutions, you know?
Oh, that's inspiring.
It's inspiring. We're going to lead America to the new world. The new time. Oh! Blah. Do you want to talk about Disney, or do we have time, or what?
I think I can do Disney in about 10, 15 minutes here.
All right, let's talk about Disney. Because you said something about Disney, and I didn't remember what it was.
Well, Disney kind of was in the news this week, and I think it's because basically they came out as pro-grooming children, and they want to teach children about sodomy, and I mean the whole bit. They really sort of lived up to every hyperbolic criticism of the 90s that fundamentalists would weigh against Disney and say, if we don't stop this, they're going to be preying upon your children and teaching them degeneracy.
Yeah,
and
which, by the way, is a good. This is a good reminder. Anything you accuse your opponents of will eventually become true, and you can use that as a power. You really can, because they will live into the opposition. People define themselves by the opposition. So if you just say you're going to be this and this is what you do, that's what they become. Just like leftist people say you're Nazis, and eventually they get the Azov Battalion.
Yeah, that's
always happens.
Good
But
point.
continue.
So I thought, all this news came out this week, and Disney and sodomy are back in the news together. I thought maybe we could take a look back at the 97 Southern Baptist boycott of Disney. And so I'll warn you, I'm about to go full church lady.
Listen, I lived through that. I remember sitting in Sunday school and have people talk about the gay day at Disney.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm 9. I don't know what's happening.
So let me...
Or whatever I was at the time.
Here's a little description of the Southern Baptist position at the time. The boycott shifted into high gear nationwide when messengers on the 1997 Southern Baptist Convention adopted a resolution on moral stewardship and the Disney Company, in which Southern Baptists were urged to take the stewardship of their time, money, resources so seriously that they refrain from patronizing the Disney Company or any of its related entities. The resolution criticized Disney for increasingly promoting immoral ideologies such as homosexuality, infidelity, and adultery. All that sounds so tame now, and like nothing burger. But at the time, that was people were very concerned. Like Christian people were really concerned about what was going on in Disney, like the whole Little Mermaid thing, which I'll talk about in a second. But at the time, it was a big deal, and so the Southern Baptist Convention, that church decided to take like a public stand and encourage all their millions of members to refrain from Disney. And now it eventually failed. 8 years later, it fizzled out and they canceled it. Now, turns out they were right about everything they said, and are owed that. But if they were right, then why did it fail? And that's kind of that's the question I want.
They were also right about Harry Potter, by the way. They did lead to a bunch of kids trying to do magic.
No, that's true. That's also true.
They were right about everything. I'm just saying the Baptists were right about pretty much everything. So make of that what you will.
The Southern Baptists are the ultimate future culture critics. Like their predictions are so good. But here's the thing: it didn't solve anything. They kind of came out and declared victory after 8 years, saying, "Oh well, Disney had parted ways with Miramax, and they had produced a movie version of C.S. Lewis, Lion, the Witch, and Wardrobe, and the big Christian classic." And so Disney decided this was a good time to roll up that campaign. So, because I think in reality, people weren't really doing it anymore. Everybody kind of lost interest in the boycott. Baptists were consuming Disney stuff just like they were before the ban, and so they had to sort of save face, and that was a mission accomplished moment for them, and they took it. But why did it fail? Why didn't they stick to it? Why did Disney become everything that they said it would be, despite the fact that during the good time in that boycott, this really hit Disney in the pocketbook. Like this was not a nothing burger of a movement. It was really big, and it cost them. So I think here's what happened. Despite the fact that the language about instituting this boycott was, I think, accurate and high-minded, the movement, in the mind of the average person, became about culture war. It's like, we're going to do culture war, and we're going to win back the culture. Now, that's a I will argue that culture war is unwinnable.
I agree. I think that even playing the game is you lose.
Yeah.
Wu Wei, the only way to win is not to play.
Well, culture is democratic. So if you're going to engage in culture creation and consumption, you're one voice of many in this thing. And you don't have the power over the media. And the media is the culture creating mechanism of globo homo culture, right? And so you're a minority and you don't have media power. They influenced the media a little bit for a time, maybe, but ultimately they failed. But the people thought they could take control of this system of culture creation and change the American culture with brute force and numbers and withholding of money. And it didn't work. And then, of course, right along that time, the internet came into being. And that changed the whole ballgame because now it just wasn't like a handful of mega corporations like Disney promoting degeneracy that you could just like boycott yourself from or hold to ransom with your patronage. But the internet is just like degeneracy for free everywhere. And you can't, and there was no way to boycott the internet effectively. And so that the whole culture war thing proved to be unwinnable. Now then there was another argument that I am sympathetic to that says, well, we shouldn't be giving money to our enemies, right? We shouldn't be spending money with our enemies. And I agree. I think it's a good idea. Don't spend money with your avowed enemies that are trying to destroy your way of life and overturn all your values and corrupt your children. I agree. Don't give them money. However, the enemy has practically unlimited money. Because, as you've noted many times on the show, they can create money out of nowhere because they are part of the power structure that creates money out of thin air. So you can't actually defund Disney. No matter how many people boycott Disney, they will find a way to make money. They will get National Endowment for the Arts grants if people stop buying their stuff, and then they'll just show the videos to children at public school. No amount of economic isolation can destroy a company like Disney. They're too integrated into the globo homo power structure. So, yes, don't give them your money. I don't give them my money. There's a lot of companies I don't give them my money, but I'm doing that because I don't, for my own sake, want to be a part of what they're doing. I don't have any illusions about the fact that this is going to stop them. Okay. So, I posit that the boycott failed instead of expanding, was because the only winning motivation here for doing things like this is for personal holiness, being set apart, keeping yourself unstained by the world. If you're doing it for those reasons, you actually can achieve your goal, and there's no reason to stop. There's no reason to give up. Because as long as you're doing it, you're reaping the benefits. Families all over the country benefited from, for a few years, cutting themselves off from the Disney machine. And you can tell the difference in those families that did and didn't take such stands during this time. People that I grew up with, I observed this. There were some families that were just totally committed to media consumption and whatever was popular. We're just going to do that. We're going to go see all the movies. We're going to do all the stuff. And then other families refrained to different degrees from integrating themselves into the globo homo culture machine. And they, by that, benefited themselves. And those benefits were evident as the young children grew up. And if you did it because you wanted to change American culture, then you failed. If you did it because you wanted to destroy the Disney company, then you failed. But if you did it because you wanted to raise holy children that are set apart and unstained by the world, then you succeeded to the degree that you did it. And that's the reason why people can do it. Now, they had a few, they did have some good arguments going on during this boycott that I think we can learn from today. And I think people need to understand about media consumption. And one of them was that because there's the princess movies. It's not so much princess movies anymore, but at that time, Little Mermaid, Aladdin, all the way till like Frozen. It was Disney princesses was the big deal, and that was their big money maker. And I heard somebody at the time point out that the fathers of these princesses, the Disney fathers, the king, they're always dumb or cruel or distant. And the protagonist believes that, or the protagonist benefits from rebellion against their cruel, dumb, or distant father. And the message there is that, the father's rules don't keep you safe. They're in fact a prison, and you need to be set free from them. Okay? So, and the argument at the time was, this is gonna make kids, specifically girls, distrust the boundaries that their father puts around their life. And so I know Christian fathers, the main boundaries that they want to put up around their girls' lives are to keep them, chaste. Okay. In this world of degeneracy. But then I think you can take that argument a little further, because look at the message here. Your father has these rules. They're not fair. You should break them because it's going to benefit from you. That's straight out of the Garden of Eden. That's straight out of the temptation of the serpent to Eve, saying, did God really say, did he really say you would die if you followed his rules? But if you break his rules, you'll benefit. You'll be wise. That's the same, that relationship of the princess protagonist and the father is the satanic portrayal of the relationship between Eve and God. That is the original satanic deception put into all these Disney movies. The Disney father is their symbolic representation of God. As a young girl watches these movies and imagines herself as the protagonist, and they always do because they sing all the songs all day, they imagine themselves as the protagonist. That girl will also, to some degree, adopt the Disney version of her father and, by extension, God. So the consumption of this media is going to shape her view of her father and his authority and God and his authority. Okay? And this wasn't, I remember thinking, oh, that's a good argument, but I didn't really get it at the time, how good and how true it is until I'm older and I'm raising kids of my own. So if you want your kids to grow up in a culture that is not absolutely depraved and degenerate, and culture war isn't going to get you that, then you have to create your culture yourself in cooperation with like-minded friends and families. This is the part where you have to get off the internet and go do things in real space with other people. Now is the perfect time to start. In this crazy time of crisis and COVID and all this pressure from the power structures of the world and globo-homoism, now is the perfect time to start doing this if you're not already doing it. Part of pushing globo-homo culture out of your life is kill your television, because you can't. Here's the thing: you cannot live in both worlds. It's a choice that you make for yourself and for your family every day, every hour. You're choosing, is this time in my life and my kids' lives going to be under the umbrella, under the signal, within the sphere of influence of the globo-homo pagan culture, or a good, wholesome culture that I'm creating and that represents the values that I hold? So what is culture? Like, how are you going to create it? This is just a quick list I jotted together. Worship and spiritual disciplines is part of culture. Entertainment and art is part of culture. People, before the radio was invented, for fun in the evenings, people would gather around the piano and sing together. Families would sing together. But then later, I saw a great comic about this, and it said before the wireless, and this is old, this is pre-television, this little political cartoon, and it had a family singing around the piano, and then after wireless, the invention of wireless, it had this family like lazing around, smoking cigarettes on couches and listening to the radio and not saying anything. So one is participatory, the other is consumptive. That principle has not been understood or applied at all since the invention of the wireless radio. And because of this, you are not creating your culture. You are having a culture put upon you by outside forces that you'd have no control over. Okay. Back to what is culture. We had entertainment and art, shared traditions. Okay.
None of those.
National traditions are great and all, but if you don't,
yeah.
you need to be making traditions with the people in your life that you consistently do. And I don't know what those are going to be. You got to figure that out for yourself. That's the point. Is that with your family, with your friends, you need to be making traditions that you hold and honor and enjoy together. And you know what? They're more meaningful than the traditions of a decaying country. They'll be a lot more meaningful to you. Education. I'm a big fan of homeschool. It's not for everybody, I don't think, but directing the education of your children in some way, whether it be by selecting what school they go to and being a part of how the curriculum is decided and shaped, being a part of who are hired as teachers. Those are all, you can exercise that control in a variety of educational settings that are not just go to public school. Even in some public schools, honestly, in more rural areas, there still is good local community and control of what happens there. And so you got to answer that kind of question for yourself. But if you're not creating your children's education, then someone else is creating it. And those people work for the federal government. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what else to tell you. Like, if people don't see the distinction between education that you are in charge of creating and curating, and education that union government employees that went to some gay early childhood education program and learned all about communism and sodomy. Who's making the calls here? Is it you or is it them? You got to answer that question for yourself. Also, culture is in-group economies. Like, I show economic favor when I can to people in my group in business, especially in procuring food for my family. If a relative or a friend is raising chickens or cows or pigs, they're getting my business. I don't even care if the beef isn't that good. Okay, if it's real pasture, like grass-fed beef, it's going to be dry. I'm going to get most of it ground beef. You're not going to have juicy ribeyes. That's a sacrifice I'll make to know, not just for health reasons where my meat came from, but for cultural reasons. Is I want to, if somebody in my group is undertaking this effort, I want to participate and support them in some way. And also in-group charity and service. You can care for people, like everybody wants to go help the pygmies in Africa who are starving and have malaria. That's good. That's good and all, but, and do that if those of you feel called to. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but it's like the people in your life are in your life for a reason, and you can serve them and help them too. And just because they're your neighbor or your family member, like, people turn up their nose at helping a family member in need because it's going to make it awkward or something or whatever. It's like, no, like, that's, if your relationship with your family is so weird that you can't help them when they're in need, then that's a signal to you that your culture and your community is dysfunctional or non-existent. And then, I hear Christians maybe putting up an objection. They say, smokestack, what about evangelism? Well, I would posit that creating an upright and healthy and holy culture, creating that for yourself, is the definition of being that shining city on a hill that we're supposed to be. It's not a shining individual in a sea of degeneracy. It's a shining city up on a hill. Right? Up on a hill.
That's true.
Up on the moral high ground. It's a bunch of people together took that ground and fortified it, and they built something good there. Okay? That's what the picture is, and that's, you actually have to really think about what that means. To the degree that your cultural life is undistinguishable from the globo homo culture, your spiritual witness and example will be seen as empty and hypocritical. If the things that you are taking in and putting out of your life are exactly like everybody else, what's the point? What spiritual claim can you make that anything that you do is worth someone else doing if you look exactly like them, right?
Yeah, and everyone looks exactly like everybody. Which is the trouble.
Yeah, and that's what we got to fix. Is like, you've got to want to be weird. I don't know.
I've tried to help. I don't know what more I can do.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
I've tried to get people to believe in dinosaurs and that space isn't real.
Yeah.
And, I've tried to get them to believe that both dinosaurs are fake and that they're still alive in New Mexico. So what more can I do?
But that's the I wanted to go back to the Baptist boycott because they had something right. They just didn't understand what they were doing. And you can fix it today, listener. You can do it today. You just got to understand why you're
There's
doing
no way to win the culture war.
No, but you can create your own. You can create your own.
Right.
And that's what my weird family and friends are trying to do. And you all can do it too. Right. And it's great. And it will actually benefit you. And you can win. You can win if you set the right conditions of victory. So there you go.
That's true. You can also set the conditions of victory so low that it's impossible to lose.
Well, we're going to try to go for a happy medium.
Yeah, I guess so. That's all true. That was good. I just, I can't help but feel that most of the people that listen to this are going to say, yeah, that's a good idea. Everything he said was good.
Yeah.
Nah, I'm not going to do it.
No, maybe one or two of them will.
Yeah, it's just people, this is why, you gotta, I don't know. There's no solutions. There is solutions, but it's all everything that, we've described the solutions. They just don't want to do it. And you can't have a solution to that.
Right. Well, I exhort them nonetheless.
Yeah, I do too. Should I play a song on the way out, or should we go?
Yeah, play. All right. Yeah, play us a tune, man.
All right. I just feel like singing this morning. I don't know why.
Fire it up.
All right. Let's see. Hold on. Ha. Wait a minute. Are you familiar with this tune?
No.
Feeling my way through the darkness. You know it now? Guided by a beating heart. Can't tell where this journey will end, but I know where it starts. They tell me I'm just too young to understand. Say I'm caught up in a dream. Well, life will pass me by if I don't open up my eyes. Well, that's fine by me. So wake me up when it's all over, when I'm wiser and I'm older. All this time I was finding myself. I didn't know I was lost. Wake me up when it's all over, when I'm wiser and I'm older. All this time I was finding myself. I didn't know I was lost. Tried carrying the weight of the world, but I only have two hands. Hope I get the chance to travel the world, but I don't have any plans. Wish I could stay forever this young, not afraid to close my eyes. Life's a game made for everyone, and love is the prize. So wake me up when it's all over, when I'm wiser and I'm older. All this time I was finding myself. Didn't know I was lost. Doesn't that go well with dinosaurs? I think so.
Yeah.
All this time I was finding myself. I didn't know I was lost because I didn't know I was a dinosaur inside.